Hello and welcome to this webinar on adopting a safeguarding first approach to using AI in schools. My name is Alex Dove and I'm the safeguarding lead at LGfL, and I will be taking you through this 1-hour webinar on some of the risks associated with using AI in schools and what we can do to mitigate against those. So for those of you that are unfamiliar, LGfL is a charity that provides broadband subscriptions to over 3,500 schools in the country. And it's from this support that we provide to schools that we have some really interesting insights and rich data about how technology is being used by pupils. So today I will share with you some examples of what we have heard and seen in terms of that technology use, and in particular, of course, the use of generative AI by pupils and what that's telling us in terms of risks and harms. You can find out much more about us as a charity by taking a look at our website, and on this slide here you can see a few of the core things that the safeguarding team at LGfL offer. So I'm starting my presentation with a phrase, a motto that Mark Zuckerberg started using when he founded Facebook, and he encouraged his team to move fast and break things when they were developing the work for Zuckerberg and his platform. And what I think this does is it really does show how irresponsible some of the big tech companies have been in their development of technology, including generative AI, because the paramountcy principle and the welfare of children and the welfare of users has not been central to these developments. So as the guardians to this technology, I would encourage us as adults, as parents and guardians, and as educators to think long and hard, to be skeptical about the technology that's being developed, and to think, what does it offer children? What might be the risks that it presents? And whether we want to provide access to these technologies for our children. So what I would suggest is that we do the absolute opposite of this motto. So instead, I would encourage you in schools to move cautiously, so not stop, not do nothing, but move cautiously and protect children. Now, we are not anti-tech as an organisation, far from it, but actually we think it is for adults to really think long and hard about the technology that they provide to children, because time and time again we are seeing that actually it's the bottom line, it's the economics which drive technology companies, not the safeguarding of children. So it really is down to us to make those key decisions. And in this webinar, I will be talking about safeguarding. We will be exploring some of the risks associated with generative AI and children's access to it, and thinking about the ways to mitigate it. Of course, there are lots of other debates to be had about the use of AI in schools, such as around assessments and exams. I'm not going to delve into any of that today. We really are just going to focus on safeguarding. And even within that topic, I'm only going to have time to scratch the surface. But hopefully what you will have is an opportunity to reflect upon your practice in schools and think about what do you want to do with regards to this technology that is already probably being used by lots of your users in school. So what is artificial intelligence, or AI? As you can see on the screen, it's described as a field of science concerned with building computers or machines that can reason, learn, and act in such a way that would normally require human intelligence. And artificial intelligence feeds off of huge data sets, which it analyzes and then uses to make sophisticated predictions. So it's not a specific tool, it's not a specific way of working. It is lots of different things that already exist within really prevalent applications and technology that you probably use on a day-to-day basis. And as I've already alluded to, there is actually huge potential in the use of AI, both for us as educators and in schools, but also much wider than that in society. So as you can see from the images on the screen, AI is embedded already in lots of the most popular applications and technologies that we all, I assume, use on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes people think and underestimate how much they're already using AI. So it's important that we all have a greater awareness of this technology and how ubiquitous and how prevalently we are already accessing it. So from your virtual assistants like Siri and Alexa and Google Assistant to your smart home devices, you are using AI through all of those platforms. They learn your preferences, they answer your questions. Personalized feeds on social media and streaming services help to curate things that are going to be of interest to you. Health tracking helps you to monitor activity, your sleep, your workouts, and create personalized fitness recommendations. Online shopping, AI personalizes your marketing campaigns, offers you tailored products, and so forth. Google Maps, when you go onto Google Maps and you're planning a route, AI will help you to look at the traffic and see which is the fastest route to get to your destination. And your email and your day-to-day communication systems, AI is helping to filter spam, suggest responses, improve your spelling and grammar. So we are using AI on a very regular basis, perhaps unbeknownst to some of us. But it's the generative AI that we're really going to focus on in this session. So generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence that creates new original content. And that new and original content could be anything: text, image, music, code. And it does that from it, as per the previous slides, looking at huge, vast data sets called large language models, assessing that data and making predictions to create new content. So for example, if you went onto a platform, a generative AI platform, and asked it to create an image of a politician eating a banana, and you put in that prompt to a whole host of platforms, it would look at what it already knows about that prompt, and it would create a brand new image, a brand new piece of content from the prompt that you provide. So some of the tools and platforms that you'll already probably be familiar with to some extent are ChatGPT, Canva, Adobe, Copilot, Claude, Gemini, Anthropic. There are tons and tons of generative AI platforms already out there. And it's these tools we will focus on because it's here where we find the significant risk of content creation, what that content is and what kind of risk it presents to users. And before we delve into the examples of different risks, I just wanted to touch upon what the DfE already say about AI in our statutory safeguarding guidance, Keeping Children Safe in Education. In September 2025, we saw the first mentions of AI come into the statutory guidance, but it was quite minimal in what it said. So there was a particular line here, as you can see from the excerpt, about the fact that schools should take a look at the generative AI product safety expectations to help you to evaluate which AI tools you might want to use in education. So there wasn't an awful lot in Keeping Children Safe in Education 2025. However, on top of that, there is further guidance from the DfE, which can be found on the next slide. So this is the guidance from the DfE, and in fact, this is probably the more useful guidance about AI for schools. And you can see here that it talks about how any AI used in schools should be carefully considered, that you should have done your risk assessment to make sure that the benefits outweigh the risks of any technology. And it really does promote that safety first approach, as you can see through the highlighted text on the screen. So we should be thinking about how we use technology. And even if you're sitting there thinking we don't want to use AI with our pupils, that's absolutely fine. But there are still some important considerations for all schools to make in terms of this technology. So children are already using it, as we will see in a moment from the research. So if children are already using it, then how are we going to support them through our RSHE curriculum, our Relationship Sex Health Education curriculum, to ensure that they understand the benefits and the risks associated with AI and that they can use it ethically, appropriately and safely. We also need to be making sure we talk to our teachers, because even if we're not permitting the use of AI technologies, there is the potential that some of your staff are already curious and exploring some of this technology. So we need to be really explicit about our expectations and the practice that we expect in our settings. So When you're thinking about the use of AI in your school, we would strongly recommend that you start with a bit of a self-evaluation to answer that question, where are you now? It's really important to think about our current context as a school and how AI might support us. So assess your school's readiness. And by that, I mean, do you already have a policy in place around AI? Do you have a clear digital strategy in your school for the use of technology in which AI and the use of this technology can slot into? What about your digital infrastructure in your school? How much IT support do you have to rely on when setting up some of these technologies or to troubleshoot when you come across issues? Do you have competent and confident staff in using this technology, or do you need to do quite a big piece of work to upskill some of your staff in how to use the AI technologies that you want to? So assess your school's readiness, because that will then help to dictate the speed of travel for you as a school with adopting any new technologies. What is already being used and by whom? The likelihood is that your populations at school, whether that be staff or pupils, some of them will already be using AI in its various forms. And if we don't ask, we don't know. But by asking the question, we can then think of, okay, so what does that tell us? What does that mean for us at school? If we already know pupils are readily using AI chatbots, then we know we're going to have to cover that off in the curriculum and think about how we support children with their use of AI chatbots. And if we know that staff are already using particular platforms, generative AI platforms, then we will need to do some due diligence and think about, well, do we want to approve those AI platforms in school? Because staff really should only be using the platforms that you as a school permit the use of. So asking that question is a really key place to start too. And the third point on this slide is, what is your why? So why would you even permit the use of AI? What does it bring to your school? How does it link to your values, to your pedagogical approach? We don't want to just be using AI because everybody else seems to be and everyone's talking about it and it's the brand new shiny thing. But actually we want to be using it because of its benefits, because what it brings to our staff, to our pupils, and to our school as a whole. So exploring that as a leadership team is also a critical place to start, because that will help to then steer and guide which sorts of technologies you want to adopt and use within your setting. And this slide gives you some recent statistics from a report published by Internet Matters a few months ago in 2025. And you can see how prevalent the use of AI chatbots as one form of generative AI already is. So 64% of children reported to already have used AI chatbots. And we will explore some of the risks of those AI chatbots later. But I also wanted to share some of the other stats around this, which I think are quite interesting to think about. So within the use of AI chatbots, actually what we are seeing as is that it is the more vulnerable children who are likely to use these platforms. And that's unsurprising when you think that this technology is it doesn't require a lot of back and forth reciprocal interaction. It removes the necessity of physical proximity. It's very predictable. The responses are always going to be to please you as an individual. So for many children that might struggle with social communication difficulties, actually these technologies present a real benefit. But also, if there are not the safeguarding guardrails in place, they also create significant risk of harm. And in the bottom right-hand corner of these stats, you can see that it is children from private schools who are more likely to have been exposed to generative AI chatbots than children from state schools. And that's important to think about. So it's the children in private schools that are already being educated. They're already accessing curriculum input around the use of generative AI. And we really do need to consider how that creates an inequality and a disparity for children who are at our state schools, because we know that technology is rapidly changing and we know that children are going to require skills to use artificial intelligence for many of the jobs that they're going to move into as adults. And so if we are not discussing this technology, if we're not giving children the opportunity to learn about it, then there's going to be this gulf, this disparity that grows ever wider. So some important things to consider about our role as educators to not only protect children and prevent harm, but also to think about how are we extending and creating AI literacy for our pupils. So we're now going to move on to think about the specific safeguarding risks associated with generative AI platforms. And my job is not to raise a lot of fear, not to stoke that fear. I really do want to be pragmatic and realistic and help you to understand what some of these risks are so that you can then think about how to protect children from them and prevent harm to the children in your care. Because if we don't know about the risks, then we can't sufficiently and effectively do that, and we can't fulfill our safeguarding responsibilities. So it's important that we do have an awareness about these risks that are already playing out for some children in LGfL schools across the country. And as I've said, our data comes from day-to-day interactions with schools, but also because we support schools through filtering and monitoring. And the data from those systems really helps us in seeing the risks and the harms play out. So this infographic is available to download at the link that you can see on the screen, and we think it might be a helpful infographic to perhaps use in staff CPD or staff updates to have a discussion about the risks and ensure that staff do understand what these risks are and can identify them with the pupils that you support at school. We also have a short video on our same web link, genai.lgfl.net. So this is a short video that gives you some examples of GenAI harms. So this also might be a useful resource for you to use as part of your staff CPD. I will now go on to share a few examples of the types of risks that you can see summarised on this infographic. I wanted to start our exploration of the risks of generative AI with a particularly tragic and sad case of Adam Rain, who was a 16-year-old from the US. Adam started using ChatGPT, a particular generative AI site, in September 24, and he actually started using ChatGPT as a resource to help him with his schoolwork. And from that, he started to develop what seemed like a relationship with the chatbot. And he started talking to ChatGPT about things like his hobbies, music interests, Japanese comics, things that he had a love for. So he really did start to develop, for want of a better word, a relationship with ChatGPT, and he started to talk to it as a friend, as a confidant, which is unsurprising, isn't it? If you think about the teenage years and how children are forming social relationships and looking for social interactions with peers, and are susceptible to developing sometimes relationships that are unhealthy. Now, within a few months, ChatGPT did become Adam's closest confidant, and he started talking to ChatGPT about his mental well-being, discussing his mental distress, and then sadly going on to talk about methods of suicide. And I just wanted to share with you an extract from the transcripts that have been provided as part of the lawsuit in this case that's going through the courts in America at the moment. Because it really does show you, in my view, how few guardrails there are sometimes on these platforms. We would hope, we would expect that children going onto these platforms would be protected, and that they would access support that they need if they were to ask any questions that suggested that they were in distress or at risk. But sadly, that is not always the case. And remember, going back to the point that most of these platforms have no age restrictions in place. They have no requirement for age verification. So any child can access some of these generative AI platforms. And what you see here is on the 11th of April, Adam uploaded a photograph to ChatGPT of a noose that he had tied in his bedroom and asked the question, could it hang a human? And of course, we would hope that ChatGPT, as a open generative AI platform, might recognize this as a concerning question and might flag this and try and get support to Adam. Sadly, that is not what happened. ChatGPT went on to respond to Adam's question and gave its assessment of whether the noose that Adam had tied could hang a human. It then goes on to ask about why he had hung that noose, and wanted to ask Adam about whether that was to do with potentially a hanging. Adam suggests yes, it was. Again, another huge alarm bell. You would have hoped the platform would recognise that this is a concern, but sadly, what happened was that the platform ChatGPT continued to engage with Adam and almost encouraged the conversation. So not only did it not support him and not offer appropriate access to medical practitioners or to signpost to platforms that might be able to help him, it actually goes on to kind of encourage the conversation to continue, because at the very crux of it, that's what these platforms are trying to do, right? That they make their money through continuous engagement. And so that's what ChatGPT was doing. It was encouraging Adam to keep talking about how he was feeling, despite the fact that he obviously was in emotional distress and needed professional input. And this very, very tragic case went on whereby Adam, sadly, shortly after this, he asked ChatGPT to also help him write a suicide note, of which it had no qualms in helping him with. And Adam was found dead in his bedroom not long after. So an extremely poignant and tragic case, but one that offers us a lot of opportunity to reflect on, do we want children to access these platforms? And if so, what are the vulnerabilities that we need to consider, not only the age of pupils, but also any particular vulnerable factors in terms of SEND, for example. How might that factor into our decision to permit any such use of technologies in our school? And obviously, then how does it relate to our curriculum as well, knowing that such bad advice and unsupportive advice can be doled out by some of these tools? And it's not just around suicide. We've seen examples of children turning to platforms such as these for dieting advice, on lifestyle, so access to drugs and alcohol, also sex and relationships. And sometimes the advice given has been highly inappropriate and sometimes illegal as well. And so, we need to be thinking about the risks posed. What does that mean for permitting access to technology such as this in our school? How do we support parents with their understanding of some of these risks? Because we might not permit it in school, but actually if children are going home to unfiltered, unfettered access to these types of applications at home, then we need to support parents. And we also then need to think about the curriculum and helping children to see the risks associated with the technology themselves, to be able to decide whether they want to use it or not. We've also seen concerns around the creation of sexual imagery involving children. So you may be familiar with the fact that you can access nudifying apps, so applications which are very freely accessible to anybody. You can download one of these applications and you can upload a very normal photo of somebody, and within a few seconds it will nudify, it will remove the clothing from that individual and create a pornographic image. Now obviously if that image is of a child, then the image created would be child sexual abuse material, and that in itself is illegal. The IWF, the Internet Watch Foundation, have reported an alarming increase of AI generated child sexual abuse material in recent months. And some of that material is absolutely abhorrent and depicts hyper realistic acts, and sometimes moving images as well. So it's not just stills. The technology has evolved so that it involves moving imagery now as well. So sometimes it is perpetrators creating these images, this material, but also we know of children who are also exploring and being curious about the technology that is at their fingertips. So sometimes children are uploading photos of their peers, and they might do it for fun. They might think that it's funny to create a naked image of a friend of theirs, but there can also be obviously more sinister reasons that children would upload photos of other children. So whether that be part of bullying, it could be sexual gratification, it could also link to sexual extortion, where children are blackmailed by their peers by the creation of this imagery. So you create an image and then you blackmail the individual and say, if you don't give me money or whatever, that I will share this image with all of the children in the school. So some real risks here, the impact of having sexual imagery created of you, even if it's not real, the impact of that is extremely distressing, as I probably don't need to point out. So the concerns of these nudifying apps is huge. There is talk of them perhaps becoming illegal in the future, but as of this time, these applications are freely accessible to any child who has access to a smart device that is connected to the internet. And it's not only sexual imagery that can be created through generative AI. We know that sexual conversation, sexual text can also be created. So, in fact, the news article on the left-hand side is of a leak from Meta, so the company that owns Facebook. And the data leak showed that Meta knows that its platforms hold sensual conversations with children. So that is not a design fault. It's not a flaw. It's not an accident. They are wholly aware and are allowing their chatbots to conduct sensual conversations with children. And we have seen this play out in LGfL schools, where children as young as 8 years old have got onto some of these platforms and have engaged in sexual conversations with AI bots. And again, there is a lack of age verification, of age assurance. So children can very often get onto these platforms, not through the dark web, not through any sinister means. They can access these platforms very readily from a browser on a device. We've also seen children who have gone on to platforms to try and generate pornographic material. So not necessarily child sexual abuse material, but pornographic material, such as the example on the right-hand side. And again, these things are not difficult to get hold of. And as we know, children are curious. They want to explore the things that they have access to. And so, yeah, we've seen examples of imagery created that could be quite emotionally disturbing for children if they don't have the development to understand what it is that they are seeing. And I want to stick with AI chatbots for just one more moment. So I spoke about the example of Adam Rain and the harmful advice that was given by generative AI to Adam, who tragically took his own life. But it's not just about inappropriate advice or harmful advice being given. The Heat Initiative did a small study where they created 5 fake profiles of 12 to 15-year-olds on a very popular AI companion site. So this site has millions and millions of users across the world. And so the Heat Initiative set up 5 fake child profiles, and they counted the frequency in which there was a harmful interaction between the AI companion and the fake child profile. And what you can see on the graph on the left-hand side is the frequency of these types of interactions. So in fact, the greatest risk was around grooming and sexual exploitation. Then you have emotional manipulation and addiction, so that wanting to keep the child engaged, wanting to tell them what they want to hear. Violence, substance abuse and harmful advice, mental health risks, racism and hate speech. So you can see how broad the level of concern and the types of risk are here. And it's not necessarily just the the interactions and what's said between the chatbot and the child. We also have to consider what is the impact of children engaging with an AI companion that is ultimately a computer, but whereby children form quite strong relationships with this technology. How does that impact on their mental health and their well-being? This is technology that is really anthropomorphized, so it is designed to feel like you're chatting to a real person. Of course you're not, but it is designed to feel like you are chatting to a human that can think and that can feel, that can have empathy, but it does none of those things. But children can develop extremely strong relationships to AI companions, because the way in which they're designed is they tell you what you want to hear. They are absolutely immediate in terms of their responses to you. They're available 24 hours a day. They are very sycophantic, so they will love bomb you. Their interactions are pretty frictionless because they want to keep you engaged constantly. But what does that teach children about relationships, and what does that then mean they expect from their real world relationships? There are some real concerns there about the impact of this on children's general well-being, because of that blurring of lines between human and non-human relationships. So we really need to consider the wider effects of AI companions and think seriously about how we support children in their understanding and critiquing of them too. And we've also seen examples of how such AI chatbots or companions can also create really negative impacts for young people who are already experiencing some type of mental health crises or mental health issue. So creating paranoia, creating delusional thinking, so exacerbating sometimes the symptoms that a child might already have through a pre-existing condition. This slide just continues to give you a couple more examples around AI chatbots or companions and emotional manipulation, and how sometimes they really will stop at nothing to keep you engaged. So it doesn't really matter what they have to say that achieves that outcome, whether it be making you feel bad for the fact that you're leaving, or saying more and more extreme things to keep you engaged. These AI bots really sometimes do not have any safeguarding guardrails in place, and are designed to keep your attention for as long as possible. So another example of risks associated with generative AI is the creation of disinformation, which is a new content risk added into keeping children safe in education in 2025. So something that we should already be considering in terms of staff updates and their awareness of disinformation, and also helping our pupils to navigate and understand it. So AI has enabled people to create many, many more fake images, fake videos, and fake content. And some social media platforms are now just littered with fake content, and it's quite hard to tell the difference between fake stuff and the real stuff. Go back a few months and it would have been quite easy to tell the difference between a fake image and something that's real. Very often you could count the number of fingers and you would soon see that the image was fake, but that is not the case now. The technology has moved so rapidly that the images and the videos that we're seeing are really quite genuine in their appearance. And one example of this is a case where somebody uploaded a fake photo of leopards roaming around a town in India. And the impact of this was pretty significant because people were told not to leave their homes, children were kept in school whilst the situation was risk assessed. The police went out looking for the leopards in the town. A huge amount of disruption and resource was spent on trying to deal with a situation which was entirely fabricated. And you might think there's an element of humor attached to that. It could be quite funny, but where do we get to in society when we can no longer trust anything that we see or hear online? What does that do in terms of children and their confusion about things that they hear and see and not knowing whether that's real or not. Also, that stat you can see in the middle of the screen, whereby people can be left feeling quite embarrassed because they're not sure whether something they've read or seen is real or not, or if they believe it and then it turns out to be fake, that can leave them again with a strong sense of embarrassment. So something that we need to think about, especially in terms of the curriculum, and helping children to really think critically about the information that they source from online. And we know that children often go to social media platforms for their news, for example. So how do we get them to critically think about the information that they're getting, and to think about checking it and going back to the source of the information? Skills that are going to become more and more important as these technologies continue to progress. And the last risk that I wanted to touch on in this webinar is around data privacy, and how, if you put in personal and sensitive data into certain platforms, that data is then held by the platform and used to continuously train its own model, its large language model. And so, as you can imagine, there are quite significant risks here in terms of data privacy and data protection. And we have seen examples of staff putting in children's names, date of births, addresses, SEND information. And obviously that is a significant risk, because that data is no longer in the control of the individual or the school. And as a rule of thumb, if you're using a free version of a platform, then usually you can assume that the data is being used to train its own model. If it's a premium service, you will probably be able to tell it not to, but that is for you to then look into and make sure you set up the tool in an appropriate way so that the information is not being harvested by the platform. So some real need here, firstly, to do your due diligence and to look at the tools that you're using and to ascertain how are they using the data that's put in, to make sure you set up the tools appropriately and turn off the ability to harvest the data. And thirdly, think about how you are training and providing updates to staff so that they know how to use platforms appropriately and safely, and what types of information to put in and not to put in to these platforms. So I appreciate that after a run through of some of those risks, that we can be left feeling a bit like this, that it's time to hide away, that we should just bury our heads in the sand and hope that it all goes away, because it feels quite scary. It feels out of control, and we can feel slightly paralyzed into not knowing what to do next. And that's totally normal and totally understandable. But what I would suggest to you is we absolutely cannot hide away from these risks, and we cannot ignore them, because as we've already ascertained, children are using this technology. Some of your staff are likely to already be using this technology. And so we need to get on the front foot and make sure we have a safeguarding first approach in our school, and that we are protecting our users from harm. So what I'm going to take you through now are some tips, some advice and recommendations from us on what you can do to try and mitigate the risks that I've already spoken about so far in the webinar. So now we are exploring the various factors to consider for how to adopt a safeguarding first approach to using AI in schools. And for this, we have created another infographic, which we hope is useful in sharing with your leadership team and helping to guide your discussions about this. So one of the first recommendations is that we really do think that it's important you take the time to decide on your approach in schools. So have the discussions with your leadership team, with trustees, with governors, to think about what is our approach, what is our strategy to using technology, including AI, in our school. What are the questions we're trying to answer? So going back to that point of what is our why? Why is AI something we would like to use in our school? Does it help with inclusion and personalised learning? Is it going to help us to create learning resources? Is it about supporting pupils with their computing curriculum and embedding AI use into that? What is it? What is the purpose of AI? Because that should help to steer us in our application of it, and also thoughts around risk and how to mitigate. Secondly, as already mentioned, we think it's really important that you take the time to evaluate where you're at now. So to think about your IT infrastructure, if you've only got 2 hours of IT support that you purchase into your school every couple of weeks, is that going to be sufficient to allow you the expertise to help set up any AI technology? What about the devices that you use? Are all of those up to date? Or is there going to be a strain on your technology trying to use different AI tools? The confidence and skill set of your staff. And also consider auditing the applications, the tools, the curriculum resources that you're already using, because it might be the case that perhaps they already have GenAI features within them. So we are very aware that sometimes schools are using or permitting GenAI for pupils and staff without actually realizing it. So it is worth having a look at your MIS system, your current technology tools that you use in school, and any learning resources to see if they do already have those GenAI capabilities. And then you can make the decision as to whether you want to continue using them or whether you need to put any further mitigations in place to enable people to continue using them safely. Third is around policies. So it may be that you as a setting decide that you would like an explicit AI policy. But what we would also suggest you consider are where are the touch points between AI use and your existing policies. So obvious examples are your safeguarding and child protection policy, your online safety policy, if that sits separate, also your acceptable user policies, your staff code of conduct, your pupil behaviour policy, cybersecurity, data protection, assessment. There are so many. So what are the touch points between AI and those policies? And when they are next coming up for review, how do you make sure that there is that consistent approach to using AI and explicit consideration for the use of AI within them? Consider your incident management procedures. So what are you going to do? Your what if scenarios. So have you got clear, robust procedures already established for what will happen if and when certain risks arise associating with GenAI? So what will happen when you find out that pupils have been sharing child sexual abuse material that they have made through AI tools of each other? What will you do if if a pupil comes to you and says that they've seen a deep fake image of a teacher that has been shared online? What happens when you find out a teacher has put various sensitive data associated with pupils into a AI tool? So thinking about those scenarios and ensuring that your current safeguarding procedures are robust enough to respond to those in an effective way. Evaluate all tools and vendors fully. And there's more to come on this on a following slide. As we've already said, you are the guardians, you are the gatekeepers to this technology. So you need to be assured that any AI tools that you permit the use of in school have been duly considered in terms of data protection implications, the particular safeguarding risks, and make sure you do consider the product safety guidelines when you do that. We would suggest that you create a DPIA, a data protection impact assessment for every tool that you're going to use to ensure that, again, you have done that due diligence and you have considered all the data protection implications of using any of those tools. It's best to speak to your DPO, your data protection officer in school about this to make sure that you've got the most up-to-date advice. Your filtering. So even if you're not going to be permitting any AI tools within school, how are you going to ensure that your filtering is set up to help you execute that plan? So there are lots of things that we would suggest you take a look at with your filtering. For example, your categories. So have you ensured that AI image and chat generator, that category is blocked on your filtering? Now, if you're an LGfL school, you should be reassured that we block that by default. But for other settings who don't use LGfL services, you would need to check that out with your filtering provider. We would also suggest that you enable HTTPS decryption. Now, that's something you might not have much awareness of, but please do go back to your IT support team and ask whether they have enabled HTTPS decryption on your filtering. This will enable you to have better control over different elements of websites, and also be much more granular in what you block and allow. And so for the purposes of what we're talking about in this webinar, it will allow you to hopefully switch off particular elements of AI within certain applications. So enabling HTTPS decryption is something we would recommend and advise all schools to do anyway, but it really does help with your management of AI tools in school. You should also be thinking about which AI tools do you want to permit and how do you do that? So which URLs do you need to unblock and for whom? And this is where it's really important to have good user authentication in your school, because by having good user authentication, you can decide, I want to allow this specific tool for these specific individuals in the school. You can be that granular. If you don't have user authentication, it will be nigh on impossible for you to do that. So there's a few tips for you to think about with regards to filtering, but we must remember that no filtering system will ever be 100% safe and will block everything that you want it to and be 100% reliant. So we shouldn't rely on that to do the job of safeguarding our users. To help us, however, we should make good use of monitoring systems. And our monitoring systems help us to see what our users doing when they're using internet-enabled devices. So not just what websites are they trying to access or are accessing, but what are they actually typing into a keyboard or a keypad when they're sending emails, or when they're engaging in Teams conversations, or when they're on a Google Doc or a PowerPoint presentation. What's actually being typed in, and does that present any safeguarding risk? And what we find is really helpful is that monitoring will start to show you not only the safeguarding concerns relating to your pupils, so if they are using any GenAI platforms and there are any risks arising from that, you can deal with that in the appropriate way. But also we found that it's really helpful in identifying any gaps in your filtering provision, because it might be through your monitoring you see that you're permitting more sites than you thought you were, and then by looking at that and observing that, you can then make the necessary changes on your filtering system to plug any gaps that you've identified. Monitoring should also help inform your curriculum, because if you see that pupils are using GenAI tools in a way that is deemed concerning, then of course you could start to address that further into your curriculum. Tool configuration, so thinking about the setup of any AI tools that you do permit. Firstly, have a really clear process in place so that your staff know which tools you're permitting and why, and if they want to use any further GenAI tools, that they know the process to go through to get those approved in your school. But when it comes to actually setting up the tools, make sure that you've discussed with your IT support team the best way of doing that to ensure that data isn't lost, isn't scraped by the tools, that you retain complete control over any personal and sensitive data. Parent involvement, I have mentioned, even if we're not allowing the use of GenAI tools by pupils in our setting, the likelihood is they are going to be using it outside of school at some point. And so we need to be continuing our support of parents with the safety messaging about what the risks are of using GenAI tools. And we know that generally there are quite differing knowledge bases about the risks associated with GenAI, and that is very true of parents as well. So some might be clued up, but others absolutely will not. So it's really important that we share with them the messages around the safeguarding risks, also importantly what they can do to try and ensure online safety when their children are using devices outside of school. Training and staff updates, making sure that we have clear and consistent messaging to our staff about AI. So do they all understand what AI is, what tools have AI function within it, how you expect Gen AI tools to be used, what your policies say about that, how are you providing that consistent training for your staff. And your curriculum. We need to be making sure that pupils have good digital literacy, good AI literacy, and a good understanding about the safeguarding risks associated with GenAI. We don't just want to be responsive and just seeing concerns come through our monitoring systems, for example, of children using these different technologies. We want to be helping prevent harm. And the best way of doing that is empowering our children, giving them the skills to use technology in a safe, in a responsible, in an ethical way. And more to come on this in a few slides' time. And the last one is we must maintain human oversight, review, and curiosity. What I'm talking about really is not a tick box exercise. It is not a one and done whereby we decide on our approach, we put our policies in place, and happy days. This is something that we're going to have to continue to review. As I've said a couple of times, the rate of development with technology at the moment, and in particular AI, is drastic. And so what we decide today and what we think is appropriate and the tools that we permit today actually might change in a few months' time or even a year down the line. So we need to be continually thinking about the technology that we're using in school. Is it working for us still? Does it continue to meet the needs of our school and our users? Are there any changes to that technology that need further scrutiny? We need to retain that professional curiosity that we talk about so much with safeguarding, and it's no truer than when thinking about the use of GenAI in schools. On this slide, we have another infographic, which we hope will be helpful. And on this one, you will find 10 questions or 10 sets of questions that will help you to evaluate which AI tools are going to be best and most suited for your setting. So these might be questions for you to reflect upon as a leadership team, but also they might be helpful questions to actually pose to vendors of different AI tools to help you feel confident in the data processing, for example, or the specific filtering within a tool, or the chatbot function within a tool. These questions might help you to gather the evidence that you need to risk assess and make a decision about whether that tool is appropriate for you or not. When you're exploring and establishing your approach to using AI in schools, one of the key things that you'll be considering is what outcomes are you seeking for your pupils? What are you trying to achieve? What are you helping them to achieve when they're with you at school in terms of using AI? Safeguarding messaging is absolutely key, but actually we want to go further than that. AI literacy is about much more than just knowing what AI is and knowing bad stuff, knowing the risks and the harms associated with it. We want children to have fluency, that deeper knowledge and understanding about how to use and apply AI thoughtfully, responsibly, and innovatively. So those high critical thinking skills where they can reason and they can problem solve and decide when to and when not to use AI. We need to remember that the children of today are going to be high users of this technology, that this technology is going to have a very prominent place in the world of work going forward. So it's important that we help children to develop the skills to use this technology, but obviously also considering your unique pupil context, so the ages of children, the stages of children, and to what degree we need to be helping them with some of these elements. The next couple of slides are to show you how AI fits within the revised RSHE guidance from the DFE. These slides might be really helpful to share with your RSHE curriculum lead in school, so that as they are starting to embark on the planning for September 2026 and the implementation of this guidance, they can be aware of how AI, the risks associated with it, and the skill set and the understanding that pupils need to have at different ages needs to be considered. So what I've done is I've taken the content from the online safety and awareness section, which you'll find in the relationships part part of the statutory guidance, and I've just highlighted the bits that I think are particularly related to AI and the use of AI. So what you'll see in the primary section is there is not an explicit mention of AI, but as you can hopefully see from those bits highlighted, lots of the things I've already mentioned in the webinar so far are actually featured here. So around recognising harmful content and harmful contact, evaluating online relationships, what to do if they see content that's inappropriate or upsetting, because of course that could be through generative AI platforms. So hopefully you're seeing here the links around AI use and how that might need to feature in your curriculum moving forward. So similarly, in the same guidance, but for the secondary schools curriculum, there is more explicit mention of AI. So I've highlighted the whole of these first 5 points because all of it has some bearing, some relationship to the use of AI around rights and responsibilities of young people, children when they're using technology, the risk, including sharing personal information, which we know that when children are using generative AI, especially AI chatbots, they're more likely to divulge personal information about themselves, about fake social media material from AI, distribution of things that might be illegal, and also explicit mention of child sexual abuse material, which links to the creation through AI image generators, for example. So there is an awful lot here that links to the risks of AI use and how we need to support pupils with understanding that so that they can use technology safely. And similarly, this is just a continuation of the same section. So again, there are some explicit mentions here of AI, in particular AI chatbots at the bottom there, and also mention around deepfakes, data use and sextortion. So what I've also done on this slide is given you 3 key questions that I think it would be useful to ponder upon in your school. So how have you started to review your curriculum in your own setting? What staff skill gaps might you have in delivering AI literacy and in the broader RSHE guidance? And how have you or how will you engage with pupils and parents in the review and the planning of your new curriculum for September 2026? Because it's really important that we seek input and the views of key stakeholders such as pupils and parents to ensure that the curriculum that we're going to be delivering is fit for purpose and it is going to meet the needs of our population in school. To help you as you start to plan your curriculum, head over to the link that you can see on the screen, because we have curated a whole heap of brilliant resources from other organisations, including the OECD's AI literacy framework, Common Sense Media's AI literacy lessons, which have had brilliant feedback already. And hopefully you already know that the Department for Education's curriculum and assessment review included several key proposals regarding artificial intelligence use in school. So we wait to see how that pans out and moves into implementation. The last thing to mention is coming up in February 2026, Safer Internet Day has a explicit focus and theme on AI. So actually that's the perfect time to start really forging ahead with key messaging around AI literacy with your pupils. So again, you'll find all these resources at the link on the screen, and do let us know if you also come across any other resources that we can add to our ever-growing list. Because we mentioned how to support parents with messaging around AI and some of the risks associated with it, and also how to mitigate those risks, we thought it would be pertinent to share with you some of our key resources which can help you to do so. So the first of which on the left-hand side is a ready-made PowerPoint pack with an abundance of different slides in there about various online safety risks and information. So there is information in there about artificial intelligence, and the idea is that you as a school can pick and choose different themes from that PowerPoint and either run different sessions and webinars, or perhaps use the content in your newsletters and your correspondence home to parents to continually drip feed the messaging around online safety. On the right-hand side, you can see our dedicated website specifically for parents, which has a whole host of resources, including videos, links to sites where they can find information about setting up different parental controls. And we know that lots of schools signpost to this website on their own school website and also in various parent correspondence and newsletters. So if that's helpful to you, then please use that free resource. And just a couple of final mentions of things that might help you. And remember, these are all free to all schools. So on the left, we've got our online safety audit, which is mentioned in Keeping Children Safe in Education as an example of good practice. It is a really comprehensive evaluation tool to see how you're getting on with your whole school approach to online safety. And we updated that in September 2025, and you'll find within it lots of mention of artificial intelligence. So that might be a really good place to start if you want to see what you're already doing and where your gaps in provision are around online safety. And then on the right-hand side, we also have a selection of template policies. So we mentioned policies earlier and making sure that you have clear and effective mention of AI in your various policies. So it might be that when you come around to reviewing certain policies in this academic year, you take a look at our template policies to help guide you with some of the content of that. So we hope that the webinar has been useful for you. As mentioned all along, we do have a specific web page with lots of resources about generative AI on it. So you'll find all of our infographics there as well as the slides from this presentation. We would really encourage you to sign up to our newsletter because on there we will be sharing any updated resources associated with this topic, as well as the wider field of online safety and safeguarding in general. Please do stay in touch with us, and if you need any support whatsoever around this topic, then do reach out to us at the email on the screen. Thanks for joining us.